I'll start again. Ms. Jessica Jensen has been home educating her two daughters in the classical Charlotte Mason tradition since 2009. Throughout her years as a home educator, Jessica has taught a variety of classes with a focus on the humanities in local homeschool cooperatives. In 2019, Jessica co-founded Sola Gratia Fellowship, a Christian classical liberal arts homeschool community. She is the co-director of Sola Gratia Fellowship and leads in the areas of vision, upper school academics, and continuing education for parents and mentors. Currently, Jessica is teaching the middle school humanities program at Padea Fellowship online. Jessica graduated from the University of Idaho, where she majored in architecture and minored in art. She worked for several years in the field of architecture before looking into the eyes of her firstborn and dreaming new dreams. A West Coast native, Jessica grew up split between the city streets of tech-booming Seattle and the wilds of an Alaskan rainforest. She currently resides in Eastern Washington with her family. She loves rainy days, British literature, and endless cups of chai tea. Welcome, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I am going to mute myself and turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is the art of narration. So I'm going to do a lot of talking, but I'm also going to ask you guys to participate. So if you don't have one yet, although I'm assuming you're taking notes, you might have one, but grab a pen or pencil and some paper if you don't already have some handy. So this morning, I know some of you, I'm in the West Coast, so Jennifer started talking at 7 a.m. So I was not fully awake yet, but I was here, was listening, and I've heard her talk about it before. And she just cast this beautiful vision through loving your neighbor through rhetoric. And I don't know, I imagine that some of you are like, well, I have young kids. How on earth do I get them ready for that? But some of you are also going, I have this kid and I can barely get him to take a shower. Like, how on earth are we going to get to this, right? How on earth are we going to get there? So I'm going to address that today. And this is going to be maybe a little bit more practical than some of the things that Jennifer's gone through. I'm going to walk you through the stages of narration. And then I'm also going to help cast that vision for what it looks like to cross that bridge from narration into more formal writing like rhetoric. Okay. So if I asked you what you did yesterday, would you be able to tell me? I guess I should turn this on gallery view so I can actually see your faces. Could you tell me what you did yesterday? Yes, of course you could tell me what you did yesterday, right? Because you know how to tell, I got to warm up my tongue. You know how to tell the story of your day because storytelling is a natural gift given to us by God, who's the original storyteller. We are image bearers of God, and therefore we have the innate ability to tell stories. Telling is narration. Okay. British educator Charlotte Mason says, narrating is an art, like poetry making or painting, because it is there in every child's mind, waiting to be discovered, and is not the result of any process of disciplinary education. A creative fiat calls it forth. Let him narrate, and the child narrates fluently, copiously, in ordered sequence, with fit and graphic details, with a just choice of words, without verbosity or tautology, so soon as he can speak with ease. Tautology just means saying a thing twice with different words. This amazing gift with which normal children are born is allowed to lie fallow in their education. Bobby will come home with a heroic narrative of a fight he has seen between Duke and a dog in the street. It's wonderful. He has seen everything, and he tells everything with splendid vigor in the true epic vein. But so ingrained is our contempt for children that we see nothing in this but Bobby's foolish, childish way. Whereas here, if we have eyes to see and grace to build, is the ground plan of his education. So now we're going to talk about what narration is and why we should practice it. So put at its most simple, narration is telling back. It's speaking and writing what we know. Okay. It's an art to be practiced, It's up to us to develop and refine that natural God-given ability. So a great example of this is singing. We're all born with the ability to sing, right? I see some people are snickering a little bit. What is the difference between the person who sings beautifully and the person who just sings? And maybe it's not so beautiful. So what is that difference? Practice. Okay, the quality of the product differs because the person who sings beautifully has been willing to develop and refine their ability. Okay, we are all born with this ability to narrate, and we can let it lie fallow, or we can develop and refine it and reap a harvest. Narration is an exercise that helps our minds to digest the food at hand. Okay, it's an outward expression of an inward process. So an example is when we digest food, this idea of digestion, right? How do we digest food? Well, first we prepare the food, right? We prepare it properly. We might cut it into the appropriate size bite so that we can then chew it. Then we swallow, and then we rest, right? We don't go jump in a pool or go run a 5K, because otherwise that food's going to come right back out, which is pretty disgusting. But it's a really great analogy because the same can be said for the food of the mind. We have to digest the food of the mind. Otherwise, it's not going to stay in. So what is the food of the mind? Well, the food of the mind, according to Charlotte Mason, are living books, great art, and nature study. Karen Glass, the author of Know and Tell, The Art of Narration, says, when any of us have to think about something thoroughly enough to be able to relate it to someone else, we are making that bit of knowledge a part of ourselves and our experience. Narration is an exercise that builds the intellectual habits of attending, apprehending, ordering, and understanding. Karen Glass says, at its heart, narration is a relationship-building exercise. When we lift narration out of its everyday context and use it as an educational method, we are giving each pupil narrator the opportunity to create, build, or strengthen his relationship with knowledge. The relationship develops on several levels. The child forms his own relationship with the material he is narrating. And as his relationships become broader and deeper, he begins to perceive the relationships that exist within knowledge itself. The first steps toward personal acquaintance with knowledge become the first steps toward higher level thinking skills. G. Armitage Smith, Esquire, says, knowledge has been said to consist largely in relationing. By this is meant to know an event. To know an event is to know it in all its bearings, in its relation to other events in time, place, and circumstance, to know the causes and effects in the sequences of which it forms a part, and to be able to put it in its true place in the complex series of which it may be only a small item. Narration is an exercise that builds memory. Things that are narrated will be remembered because they are properly digested by the mind. Jason Barney, author of A Classical Guide to Narration, once said, narration is a way of showing gratitude for the feast spread before us. I love that. I love that idea that narration is a proper response to the feast. We need to digest the feast, right? When we're served a great feast by someone, we taste it and we enjoy every bit, and we tell people about how great it was. So I love that analogy. Narration is also the foundation of composition and oratory skills. Karen Glass says, children who narrate grow fluent in their ability to express what they know. When they are listened to with respect and interest, they learn in turn to listen to others. So, and that's a huge key, right? It's a huge key for our children to learn to listen well, to listen to others. That is a great way of loving our neighbors. So what are the principles of narration? Well, narration must be done with high quality books, what Charlotte Mason would call living books. So I know that term is out there, and I know it took me many years to figure out, well, what does that mean exactly? Like, what is she talking about, living books? So here are some defining characteristics of what a living book is. Living books are typically narrative in style. They are written by an authority with a passion for the material. Living books engage the reader and draw him or her into learning more about a subject. Living books make the subject come alive. And living books contain living ideas and knowledge appropriate for the child. Okay. The food of the mind is ideas, which is why it's essential that we provide the mind of the child with living ideas on which to feed. Narration is most effective if the material is read attentively only once before narrating. Now, this is not a ban on rereading. Okay, Charlotte Mason is not against rereading. She's a fan, I think, of rereading. But in this case, when we're talking about narration, we're trying to build that habit of attention, of listening closely, of paying attention. And we can't do that if we read something to our student 3 times before we ask them to narrate, right? They've had now 3 chances to listen instead of just 1. So we want to build that habit of attention. And so we read it once attentively, and then we ask for narration. And then they can read it as many times as they want. We accustom our students to tell accurately, consecutively, and fully. You might be thinking, have you heard my child? Like, I've tried this. It doesn't work, right? But I have to say, no quizzing or interrupting. I know it is such a temptation, but the student shares what they know, and we respect that. We hear what captured their imagination, not ours. Okay, this is the work of their mind, not ours. But what if they left out something really important? What if they made a mistake, right? You're thinking, I can't just let them think that forever. Well, narrations may be corrected or completed by either another student or a teacher after they're finished. So we let them finish. We model what listening well looks like, right? We listen fully and completely. And when they're done, we can make some corrections, or we can complete it or have someone else do so. Okay. This is often where we need to be reminded of Charlotte Mason's first principle, which is children are born persons. Our children are not robots. They can't show up and give the exact same quality of output every single day. When we're talking about narration, we're talking about something that is a daily activity, but they're not going to be able to give their best, most excellent narration every single day. They're going to wake up on the wrong side of the bed. They're going to have a nightmare and not sleep well. They're going to get in a fight with their sibling and just be grumpy after that. They're going to have human experience, and we need to have understanding and compassion for them in that. Yes, we set a high standard, but we don't expect flawlessness. We give understanding. Narration should always be the child's own work. It is part of the journey of self-education. Charlotte Mason said, self-education is the only possible education. The rest is mere veneer laid on the surface of a child's nature. We let them make their own connections. Okay? Connections in the mind can't be stripped away. Narration should periodically review past material. It helps them to build long recall. Okay, so if the material was previously narrated, the child is going to have much better recall of that material because it's been digested by the mind. Okay. So you're probably thinking, okay, this sounds great, but how exactly do I do this? So we are going to get some practice here today. Oral narration would start around age 6. Okay, Charlotte Mason would say not before age 6 would we start this. So again, this is going to go a little bit against what contemporary practices are with education. We're going to wait. We're going to wait until they're at least 6. And you're going to start with telling back. You're going to start with something really short. Fables make a great choice for these really short first narrations. Okay. These first narrations are going to be short, but they're going to grow over time with practice. And we just need to be patient with our students. Modeling helps the student to understand what narration is. Okay. And it also helps you to understand the process of the mind. So right now, we're going to get some practice. We're going to read a fable. Let's see. Oh, I gotta change my window here. All right. The Gnat and the Bull. A gnat flew over the meadow with much buzzing for so small a creature, and settled on the tip of one of the horns of a bull. After he had rested a short time, he made ready to fly away. But before he left, he begged the bull's pardon for having used his horn for a resting place. "You must be very glad to have me go," he said. "It's all the same to me," replied the bull. "I did not even know you were there." All right. Do I have any volunteers to narrate? Orally narrate. All right, Denise, let's see. Ask to unmute. You should be able to unmute now.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Let's try it. Let's give her a try.
Whenever you are ready, you can begin.
Oh, I don't see anything up there.
Oh no, we have to do it from memory.
Oh, from memory. Oh, okay. Exactly I mean, just, am I paraphrasing the story?
Just tell back what you remember.
Well, what I remember was the gnat came to land on the bull's horn and then went to go fly away and told the bull that you must be glad that I'm gone now. And I'm probably just picking up major parts, and the bull said, "I didn't even know you were there."
All right. Thank you.
Did I miss anything?
I don't know. Let's see if someone else wants to narrate. Someone else want to give it a shot? Deanna, okay. Let's see. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Oh, can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think she got everything except for like the moral of the story, which was that usually we think of ourselves greater in our own eyes than most everybody else sees us. And usually the smaller the mind, the bigger we think we are, kind of is the moral of the story. So the smaller the mind, the greater we think we are. But I pretty much think she got the whole thing pretty well.
She did good. She did good.
Except for the moral of the story, which is kind of hidden behind the pictures.
Yes.
So.
Yes. All right. So how did that feel? How did it feel to have to give that oral narration?
Am I still on?
You're still on.
Oh, I'm still on. How did it feel? Well, I volunteered, so it didn't feel it felt a little awkward, but I volunteered. I think that a child, when they're told to narrate, with my own kids, when they've been told to narrate, sometimes they come kicking and screaming to it. So more so my son than my daughter, but I think you're right when we don't give them agency, their own agency to talk about it. And we don't honor the things that they find interesting. They're less eager to share when we want them to. Like when we tell them to share about something, if we don't honor the things that they're excited about when they're excited about it, even if we don't really care about it, they're less eager to talk about what we want them to talk about. So does that make sense? So when we ask them to talk about something in particular, if we don't give them the time and space to talk about something they're interested in at a different time, they're not going to give us what we're asking them to do when we're asking them to do it. So I felt awkward, even though Denise pretty much narrated the story. It was just the moral she left out. I still felt a little awkward, like, even though I can only see 4 people, so I can't see everybody else. So it wasn't as awkward as, like, I'm probably speaking to more people, but I can't see their reaction, so I don't really care.
It's okay.
Anyway. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe that's more of an answer than you wanted, but that's what you got.
No, that was good.
Okay.
How about you, Denise? What were some things that you noticed about your response? Like, how did it feel while you were trying to narrate?
Well, I think that I've mentioned to Jennifer and the people that were on previous calls when we were doing the fellowship that this is all very new to me. So I didn't really know that narration wasn't reading from the script. Like that was my first, because we just started The Hobbit and I was struggling with trying to figure out how to narrate this. So we were taking kind of bits and pieces, and I didn't do like a full narration. So for me, it felt kind of like that I didn't really know what I was doing, you know, and oh, I'm supposed to paraphrase the story. That's my narration. And so it actually helped me understand how to approach this with the younger kids, but it helped me learn because I did not know what the process was, right?
Yeah. Well, and you when you do it yourself, you start to realize how many things actually have to happen inside the brain in order for this to happen, because it sounds so simple. You're like, you're just telling things back. Like, what is that going to do? But when you actually have to do it yourself, you're like, oh, what? I don't get to look at the book. Like, what? I have to remember this. Like, oh, this is actually harder than I thought. You're doing a lot of different activities within the brain in order to achieve it. All right, so those first narrations are going to be short. So like I said, we want to start with something short. So like when you're reading The Hobbit, maybe read a paragraph or maybe even a few sentences and see how much your student can tell back. How much can they remember, and then build over time, okay? Build over time, but keep the quality high. So each time you stretch them a little bit, make sure that quality stays high. So if you think about it kind of like a rubber band, you want to stretch, but you don't want it to break, okay? So we want to stretch them a little bit and a little bit and a little bit until they can do longer pieces. So reading a whole chapter like out of The Hobbit and then narrating that as a beginner is incredibly difficult. That would be incredibly difficult. So start small and then you can build. Okay. Be consistent. Narration is a long process. The building of intellectual habits. Habits are best built on regularity. Okay, so building those intellectual habits takes regularity. So short narrations done daily is better than then you're like, oh, I didn't do it all week. Let's read this whole chapter and then you're going to narrate it. And then they're like, I have no idea what to do now, right? They're just lost. They're drowning. So small bits regularly is going to be how you build. It can also be used in creative ways in a class or with a group of students. You can do something like string narration where one person starts and then you go to the next person and the next person, or they can do it with a partner, or they can do it in a small group. Just, you know, depends on the size of your group. You can also do creative things like they can draw a narration, or they can act a narration, or they can play it out with their Legos, right? We're talking about young children here. So we need to find ways to connect with them and to allow them to express what they know in ways that are appropriate to them. Okay. written narration. This is where you're going to need your pen and paper. Written narration is going to begin usually around age 9 to 10. So we started at 6, and now we're moving to 9 to 10. So it's been years. We have done years of daily oral narrations. They are now comfortable with oral narration, and it has become an ingrained habit. Okay, it's ingrained in them. It feels somewhat natural to them at this point. So we're going to read another fable. Let's see. Screen sharing. I got to get the right one up first, though. There we go. This is a problem with having multiple screens up. Then you get lost. You have to find it. All right. The Frogs and the Ox. An ox came down to a reedy pool to drink. As he splashed heavily into the water, he crushed a young frog into the mud. The old frog soon missed the little one and asked his brothers and sisters what had become of him. A great big monster, said one of them, stepped on little brother with one of his huge feet. Big, was he? Said the old frog, puffing herself up. Was he as big as this? Oh, much bigger, they cried. The frog puffed up still more. He could not have been bigger than this, she said. But the little frogs all declared that the monster was much, much bigger, and the old frog kept puffing herself out more and more until all at once she burst. All right, now you're going to take a little bit of time to jot down a written narration of this fable. Okay, so we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. All right. So to have some volunteers to tell me how this felt. What kinds of things did you notice were happening within you while you did this? I can't see everybody at the same time. Anne is, and Nicole is raising. Okay. Anne, I've got you first.
The hard part for me is thinking through, okay, I'm rewriting it, but it feels almost as long as the original fable. What do I started writing down some of the dialogue and thinking, I'm just trying to retell it. How much do I actually have to? What's important? And then also as I'm like retelling it, I'm kind of adding some of my own interpretation of it in. And I'm thinking, oh, I can't do that either. This is getting more complicated. I'm not just retelling.
Yeah, those are great points. We'll touch on that. All right, and then who else? Nicole.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So for me, what I was thinking as I was going through is I'm a writer by natural, like I really like to write. And so I have to make sure that I just don't start going way off and retelling the whole fable in my own words and all that kind of thing. So for me, it's a reining in of what I want to say. And I see that sometimes in my students when they're just like, you know, like till, and you're just like, you just bring it back, right? Focus on the major things. But then I also found myself correcting my grammar, thinking of using a better verb here, or should I describe the frog here? Is it huge or is it big? Or, you know, so those kinds of things as I was working through it. And then I was just like, oh, just write whatever's coming to your mind and stop obsessing about it, for crying out loud.
Yes, I think both of you are natural writers. Is there anybody here who struggled with it, who would like to share maybe what that felt like? Anyone? Denise? All right.
So this question right here, what if your child is not an auditory learner? I am not an auditory learner. I lose everything in that process while trying to create a keyword outline and following the story. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm like, this was like, was I nervous while I was like testing on this? You know, I didn't know. So that was it was a challenge for me to feel like I was up against time on the screen, that I needed to make a keyword outline to like figure out how I could retell this with, you know, or I could just listen to it and try and remember it. So it's one or the other for me. That's all.
Were you trying to write it down?
I was just trying to like ox pool, drink, splash water, crush frog, mud, frog, mist. Okay. And then I got lost. I'm like, okay, I can't do this, you know.
Okay.
So I need more time with the narration in front of me, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so I think we have hit on a couple of different challenges that we run into, right? This isn't easy for everyone. This can be really challenging. I completely relate to what you're saying, Denise, that your auditory is difficult for you. It is for me. If I read something, I'm good. If I have to listen to it and retell it, it is so much harder for me. However, the answer to that really from Charlotte Mason would be that we need to strengthen that weakness. Okay. We don't just give it up. We don't just go, oh, auditory is really hard, so we're not going to do it that way. Instead, we say, okay, that's a challenge, and we're going to show some understanding towards that challenge. But at the same time, we're going to strengthen that area, right? That muscle is weak, and we're going to work on strengthening it. And so that's what she would say. This comes up all the time, and I think God just gave me these two different children so that I could give this example all the time, because I have extremes on either end. One is a natural born writer, but if you ask her to tell you something, she's like she has no words. And you're like, come on, spit it out. And the other one will give you so much detail that you're like, oh, please, was this ever going to end? But if you put a pen in her hand, she cries. Okay, so this is where I was at with my children. I'm like, Charlotte Mason doesn't say this is going to happen. Like, what is going on here? And so I've had both challenges. I've had the child who needs to be strengthened on listening and speaking, and the one that needs to be strengthened on being able to tell and write. So they are weaknesses, but we work on them, right? We show some understanding, but we work on them. Yes, Nicole.
So it was interesting because as your audience, you were reading it aloud to us, but it was also on the screen so we could read it too. So when you're doing narrations, like in my classroom, when I'm doing narrations with my kindergartners, they're not seeing the text and they couldn't probably read it anyway. But so how do you, so that helps me to be able to see the words on the page and then to be able to orally narrate and also do a written narration. But if you don't see those words on the page, there's something that, you know, your brain has not had privy to, right? So if you struggle being an auditory learner, then it's even harder that way. So Denise, I'm not an auditory learner. I learn best with words on a page. You combine those two things together, the auditory or the oral, the read aloud and the words on the page. And it's like, you can meet those students in two different ways. So, but I know a lot of what Charlotte Mason is talking about is the oral narration and the read aloud orally, so that the students have to learn to be attentive to what they're hearing in order to then tell it back or write it back. But I think she does later on go into older students are doing written narrations from what they've read themselves. I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Yeah. It's just important never to make it an either or. It's a both and, right? And we can make understanding. So, you know, I had a daughter who struggled with reading, but she's very auditory. And so for her, for a long time, reading while listening to an audiobook at the same time helped her to be able to do the work. And that was something she did for a long time. And now in high school, she's not really doing that so much. She's able to just read it and be able to do it. So it works kind of both ways. So it's a both and. We keep strengthening both things. So it's important once you start written narration to remember that you are adding a skill, you're not leaving one behind. So again, it's both and. It's not either or. We're not doing oral or written. We're continuing with both. We're adding the skill. So they're two separate skills and they take different parts of the brain and we have to keep practicing them both. You're going to start small with just a sentence or two once a week. So this is your younger student, right? Your 9 or 10-year-old. They're going to start small with 1 or 2 sentences a week. Fluency in oral narration won't transfer to fluency in written narration without practice. Okay, these are different skills. When you start written narration, if you have this like fluent oral narrator and you're just expecting that they're going to take that 5-minute oral narration and write it down on a piece of paper, that is not going to happen. This is a different part of the brain that gets activated here. And so you're kind of going all the way back to the beginning. They know what a good narration should sound like, but getting it out of their brain through their fingers is a whole different experience than getting it out of their brain through their mouth. So we have to practice both and we have to show that understanding. Again, they're born persons. We're going to respect that. We're going to go back to the beginning and not have humongous expectations in the beginning that bury them, right? So we're going to just start small. We're going to build gradually. We're going to build until the student is writing about 150 to 300 words every day. Okay. This is a short paragraph. It's really not that many words. It's really not a humongous effort. It's a short thing in the day that it's a habit, right? It's building a habit. And this is a 3 to 4 year process for students if they're doing this on age. So we can talk about starting with older students and things like that later. But for students who are, you know, progressing through this at their, you know, appropriate ages, then this is going to be about a 3 to 4 year process. You're going to go from a couple sentences to paragraphs daily over 3 to 4 years. Okay. You're going to give opportunities for your students to read their narrations to you. Okay. Hearing it out loud, what you've written, is going to help them to self-correct a lot of errors in what they've written. So they know what language sounds like. Okay. You've read them great books. You've spoken to them their whole life, right? They know what good language sounds like. But when they write, sometimes there's a disconnect, and what they get down on the paper isn't what they would say coming out of their mouth. And so when they hear themselves reading it aloud, they're going to catch all kinds of of their own mistakes, and you're not going to have to get involved with that, which is great. It's a part of the process of self-education. They're going to want to do that. Do not correct written narrations. This one is so hard for a lot of us. Fluency is the goal of the written narration. Okay, fluency, getting those words out of their head onto paper with some ease, some level of ease, getting that fluency up, thoughts out of head onto the paper. If you make this about grammar and mechanics, your students are going to freeze up, and you don't want to freeze them up. You want to free them up. So by not correcting written narrations, we're freeing them up to get their thoughts out on paper without judgment. Okay, if they're worried about spelling every word correctly or getting every punctuation right, they're going to be so worried about that they can't let the words out. Okay, getting the words out is hard enough. So free them up to do that. Don't correct the written narration in this stage. Okay. Encourage them to write longer, more complete narrations over time. Okay, it takes time, just one little bit at a time. Introduce a few basic requirements about, okay, so this happens like towards the end of this phase, right? So they've been doing this for a couple of years. You're going to introduce some basic requirements about conventional mechanics, but do not make it the focus of written narration. Okay, you have to be very careful. As soon as you start freezing them up, back up. Okay, back up. As soon as they start freezing, back up. So now you have a student who is around 12 to 13. They're comfortable with oral narration. They've gotten comfortable with written narration. It's become an ingrained habit. They can write about a paragraph each day. Now it's time to start crossing the bridge. Okay, so in this section, I'm going to kind of cast a vision for what it looks like to cross the bridge from narration into more formal composition and rhetoric and those kinds of things. A lot of times I've met a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, we did narration, but now what, right? Where do we go from here? How does my student write an essay or a story or whatever they want them to write? They can't see that connection between narration and that next stage. So we're gonna try to cast a vision for that here. This is a lot of what we do at Paideia Fellowship in the middle school class. This is what I do with middle schoolers in my local community. And it's really a fun process. So it's not something to be scared of. Okay, it's not big and scary, I promise. So you're going to introduce to them the craft of writing, that there are these things called style and form, and they know this at this point, right? If they've been reading living books with you and in classes, they know this, right? They've noticed this. So we're going to start paying attention. We're going to bring their awareness to the fact that there are these things called style and form. We're going to study and practice different types of writing. Okay, so with a narration, the basic one is narrative, right? You just tell it back. It's a story. You tell back the story. You can also look at different types of expository writing, different types of descriptive writing, and even for some students, creative writing. Charlotte Mason did not think you should force creative writing on all students because not all students are ready to do that activity. It's going to be too much, too overwhelming. And so you do creative writing in an appropriate way with certain students, but you don't push it on all of them necessarily. Okay. You teach them that revisions are a way of life. This is bad news, right? This is not the news they want to hear. They just want to write this thing and be done with it, right? They don't want to come back and do more. So I like to break this news. I cite a professional writer. So it's the professional writer breaking the bad news to them, not just me, right? So I always read to them chapter 1 from On Writing Well by William Zinsser. And he does a really great job of describing what it feels like as a writer and how much you need to revise and why you need to revise. It's a very short chapter, so it doesn't take too long, but it does a really good job of giving them an idea that even for professional writers, writing is hard. Revisions are hard. Then we teach them some self-revision skills. So we give them kind of a checklist these are some things to look for. Before you give this to me to read, check for some of these things. You know, are you telling this well? Is it complete? Is there any phrasing that's awkward? Is my spelling and grammar decent? Okay, we're still not necessarily looking for perfection here, but is it readable for your reader? You're going to give them opportunities to respond to feedback on their writing. Okay. Now, this is a lot of times another hurdle, another spot where it gets really sticky because students can be really sensitive about their writing. You may have sat at a table and they've cried, and then you've cried and they've cried, and everyone's crying. And what we need to do here, a way that we can help avoid this, is we let the students choose which narrations they want to revise. So we're not revising every single piece of writing. Okay, we're letting them choose like one per week. We're going to revise this. We're going to look at this. We need to be sensitive to any emotional connections they have to their writing. Okay, and this helps us to do that. When they get to choose which piece they edit, they're not in their feels about it. So we're not going to mark it up and leave a bunch of feedback, and then they're going to cry and be heartbroken because they thought this piece of writing was so good. They thought it was just perfect how it was. And now we've just cut it all up and, you know, broken their hearts. So by letting them choose, we help avoid that situation, and we don't have that situation where they get hurt and they push back and they're resistant. We're going to give feedback related to content. Okay, our feedback is going to focus on content. So what does that mean? What does that look like? So the way that I like to do is I like to ask them generative questions. So instead of making a statement or a judgment about their writing, I ask questions. And what I mean by generative question is a generative question is going to help them to generate more content. So a lot of times at this stage, what you're going to find in their writing is there's holes, right? A plot line jumps from here to here, and you're like, how did we get there? Or a new character comes in and you're like, who is this? What's happening? So you're going to ask questions like that. Who is this? What's happening here? How did we get here? Things like that. And so it's going to help them to fill in that narrative and explain things more fully. And I always ask them to sit in the place of thinking of the reader as not knowing anything about what they're writing about. Because obviously me as a teacher, I'm reading the same books as they are. So they're like, oh, well, you know. Well, I do, yes, but that's not the point, right? The point is a lot of your readers are not going to know what you're talking about. And so you have to be able to explain that fully to them as if they don't know, if they haven't read this book. So you're always going to put the writer in the reader's shoes. Okay, at this stage, you can give feedback on mechanics, but you're going to keep it light and general. So a good example of this is you have a student and they have discovered the comma, and they're so excited about it. And they put like a comma in every 3 words. And you're like, oh my, what to do with this, right? Well, you can mark the whole thing over, and then that's all they're going to see though, right? Oh, she marked every single comma, or, 95% of my commas are inappropriate. And that's all they're going to see, and that's all they're going to think about. They're not going to think about the content. And we want to keep that focus on the content. So in that case, I might leave a comment like, oh, I see you really like commas. So do I. But I think you have too many commas in here. And it might be better if you were to look at the comma, rules for comma usage and maybe take some of those out. Okay. And so you kind of put the ball back in their court, and you give them agency to edit themselves in that area, and it doesn't, hammer them down. Another example might be the student who has not discovered the paragraph yet, and they love to write, and you have this whole page, and there's so many words, and you're just drowning in words, and you need some form, right? So you might say, wow, you've got some great content here. I see you have a lot to say, and I'm really excited about it. It might make it more clear for your reader if you were to divide this into several paragraphs. Let's look at what are the guidelines for starting a new paragraph. Okay, so you see how it kind of puts it back in their court a little bit, gives them some agency, doesn't totally crush them. And it relates it back to, how can I tell this better, right? So it's always kind of focused on the content. We're going to notice good writing. Okay, so we're going to keep a commonplace notebook. That's what Charlotte Mason called it. You can also call it a reading diary or a reading journal. But it's going to be a notebook for student selected passages from any and all reading on any and all subjects. It's a place to record things that they've noticed or wondered about in their reading. And it's a place where they can notice good writing and record it for later meditation. And that's big benefits for composition. And you'll see it start to naturally happen. As soon as you introduce students to descriptive writing, their commonplaces are chock full of descriptive passages. Like they start seeing them everywhere and they start noticing them and recording them. Okay, so this all works together. And you may read good books about the art of writing. Okay, an excellent place to start is On Writing Well by William Zinsser. And in middle school, in this age, this is about middle school. I don't read the whole book with them, but I read parts of this book with them and discuss it because he has really nice short paragraphs and he has a really approachable style of writing, and they can kind of connect with that. And so we'll talk about things like, revisions I mentioned before, clarity, some key concepts like that. So he says, good writing has an aliveness that keeps the reader reading from one paragraph to the next. And it's not a question of gimmicks to personalize the author. It's a question of using the English language in a way that will achieve the greatest clarity and strength. So now, where do we go? We've looked at some types, we looked at some concepts of composition, but still, we're writing a paragraph or 2 or 3 paragraphs maybe. How do we get to an essay or something like that? Well, this is where we're going to start to study forms. We're going to look at what others have done with the form. Okay. We're going to, if you're going to write an essay, we're going to read some essays. We're going to reflect on them. We're going to look at them. What did the writer do here? Why was this so successful? What are some of the things they've done? You're going to write a report, same thing. Poetry, same thing. We're going to look at what's been done before by excellent writers. We're going to teach the skill of reverse outlining. So this is a little bit, you mentioned a keyword narration earlier today, or a keyword outline, I'm sorry. And really with narration, the goal is that we're doing that keyword outline type of activity. It can be done in our mind. Okay, we're not necessarily going to do that on paper. And that is challenging. And so that's why we start with short, small pieces and we gradually grow. But at this point, our student can do that in the mind. They can speak it orally and they can do written narration, right? So we're going to take their narration that they have already written and we're going to pull out of it an outline of their own ideas. They're going to then expand that outline into a longer format, such as an essay or a story. Okay, because written narration has become an ingrained habit, it's likely going to be more natural for the student to start with a brief narration before generating an outline for a longer format piece of writing. A time when this comes in really handy might be something like a timed essay. They have to take a timed essay, and you want to prepare them for that. You're like, well, we didn't do anything like that in our homeschool and so you wonder how on earth they could do that. Well, they can, how when you read, you hear a little voice in your head, or sometimes you practice speaking in your head. This is not just me, I don't think. But you can kind of narrate to yourself in your mind, and they can hear that in their mind, and then they can jot down a little outline of their thoughts, and then they can write their timed essay, right? So this is a way to work with it when you don't have, something like a formal program that you're working with. This is a way for them to be able to organize their thoughts and into a longer format, because it is hard in your brain to plan ahead an essay, to just hold that in your head and not write anything down. That's really a challenge. So if we teach them the skill of being able to narrate first, pull an outline out of that and then expand from it, where they're working off of their own ideas, right? They're not pulling it from some artificial source. It's their own ideas, and they can build on that. And then during the final years of education, you may introduce a more formal composition program. And you have now crossed the bridge. But do not leave narration behind. Keep narrating in both oral and written form. Here, if we have eyes to see and grace to build, is the ground plan of education. That's what I got. Let's see, I think there's some questions. If you guys have questions.
Yeah, there's a couple here in the chat box. I'll and then we'll take maybe take a couple questions, and then if anyone needs to take like a 2-minute break before we have our more formal Q&A. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you addressed the one about, well, okay, so Stephanie asked, what if your child is not an auditory learner? Must the source text for narration be read aloud by parent? Can the student read it himself? I know you addressed that in part. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I would say if it's really hard to the point where you can't do anything, you can't function, then I would go back and forth. I wouldn't give it up entirely, but I would, maybe read aloud while they're looking at it, and then transition, or have, one day a week where we read something really short aloud and expect them to narrate it back. And then maybe for something a little longer, we can read it with our eyes. Just don't give it up. It's a both and. That's kind of how I would say that.
Awesome, thank you. Anne says, so for the sake of time, I have my 7-year-olds do written narrations of what they're reading 3 to 5 times a week. We also do oral narrations of stories we hear. Is there a pitfall of doing written narrations so young?
I think Charlotte Mason would just say most of them aren't ready yet. But that's not true for every child. Like I talked about my own children, and when my younger daughter was 6 or 7 years old, which is the time to start oral narration, she would actually ask me if she could write it down instead. I was like, well, today you can, but you're not getting out of this completely, like we're going to work on this. I'm going to find a way to make this work. So yeah, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Sake of time. I don't know if there's a pitfall. I mean, I guess if you have expectations on them, too much expectation on them, that could be a pitfall, because it could freeze them up, and it could, kind of hinder their progress. But if they're willing and able to do it, then I don't think you need to say, no, you can't do that. I don't think that's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
How to cue a very prolific reader, how to pare it down. We let them ramble on and on. So yeah, you can address that. You can address that. You can tell them they have, a certain amount of time, or, address the fact that they're telling a lot of side stuff that's kind of all over the place, and narrow it down, kind of stick to the main story, because that is a skill that they need. When you write on paper, you can't just ramble on and on either. So you got to find a way to be effective, to effectively communicate. So I think, yes, you can address that. Would you recommend teaching a formal outline structure like IEW at younger age, provide a way for a parent who can't organically teach the mechanics? No, I wouldn't. I don't necessarily, I don't necessarily think those teach the mechanics super well. If you are reading living books with your children and they are narrating them, they're going to start picking that up. But also Charlotte Mason would add copywork and dictation to a full language arts. Mm-hmm. And so that's where they would start to pick that up more too. So yeah, there would be more than just narration. But I don't think you need a formal structure program in order to teach writing mechanics. It just doesn't seem necessary to me. What is wonderful about, and why should I use Karen Glass's No and Tell versus, say, Writing and Rhetoric by Classical Edec? Oh, well, there's a hard question. I love No and Tell. I have it here. It's like my little narration Bible. I have all little tabs in it and everything, right? I honestly feel like as I have fumbled around through the years, that using narration and using no and tell as a guidebook that's priceless as a guidebook. Before we had that, it was a little bit more bumbling around in the dark, I felt like, but it just is more natural to the student, and it allows them to develop in their mind. I don't really have experience with writing and rhetoric other than having looked at it. I don't necessarily think it's bad or harmful. I'm just convinced that narration works so well and so naturally. I also think in a big family or in a classroom, it works really well because you can address each student where they are and just take them that next little step, and not throw them into something that maybe they're not ready for just because everyone else is doing it, or because it's next chapter, or something like that. You really get to individualize it and address them where they are and help them grow. So I appreciate that about it.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think also the thing I like about Karen Glass's book is that it creates a scenario where you're really honest about the relationship between reading and writing. And so the reading that we're doing in history and literature and these other areas, that's what we're writing about. So it's teaching that dynamic. And the value, I would say, of like, say, writing and rhetoric is especially, and this is I think the purpose, the biggest purpose and benefit of a really great curriculum is that it helps bridge the gap for us as we're learning to coach a skill that we're still kind of figuring out. And so if like, for example, once you master rhetoric, you don't need the last tools of writing anymore. You could like just do it yourself. But most of us aren't there yet. And so writing and rhetoric is a fun way to play with language. It incorporates some narration. There are selections for reading in there. And it does give you a form to follow, so then it produces some confidence in you as a parent and as a teacher, where you're still like, depending on where you are in that process. The downside to it is that it's less flexible, but it's meant to be less flexible because it's trying to hold your hand and give you more guidance. So you just got to decide what you want. The other could be negative is like it pre-selects what you're reading. So it may not be in alignment with the books you selected that year. It may be a different time period. It may be a different, like, whatever is important to you in terms of harmonizing content, that may not be the case. So that's my assessment of it.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to the that idea that we're going to let them choose what they edit and revise and all that. With a more formal program, they don't necessarily get to choose as much. And so they don't have that autonomy. And I think their willingness is a little bit less. So I think it does help to let them have that autonomy a little bit. But yes, and being able to integrate it in with everything that you're already reading, and helping to form those relationships is huge. That's a huge thing. So I would say, even if you are using something like writing and rhetoric, you're adding it in, keep narrating, keep building that relationship. It's okay to add some other things, but yeah, I would keep building that relationship. Denise, you are getting so good at this. Do you have any suggestions for helping to build a keyword outline of a narration without writing anything? Maybe to see the story play out in their mind with pictures so they can narrate a little better. Yeah, whatever you need to do in your mind to be able to see that. If you can tell the story in your mind or see it in your mind in pictures, yes, you're right on the mark there.
Can I just acknowledge something really quick? That's an excellent example of somebody stepping into coaching right there. That's amazing. Like, you're naturally going to let me unlock the inner logic right now and figure out what's in the gap. Like, that's what you're doing. I just wanted to acknowledge that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's good. Ask them to think about if they would want to write down everything they're orally narrating. Yeah, that's a good question. Would you want to write all this down? Yeah, no. Should have clarified age students more 11 to 12 for formal writing like IEW writing rhetoric. Yeah. If you feel you need that support, if you feel strongly that you need that support, you could. I think there's a little soapbox for me, but I think in our country, in education, we expect kids to have down like this ability to write an essay way earlier than they need it, way earlier. And so I think a lot of times when parents feel that pressure to add that formal writing program by middle school or before middle school, that's the pressure they're feeling. And we really need to push back against that, because they really don't need to. And when I talk to my students, I say a lot of times, you know, like, how many of your parents go out and write essays as an adult? Not many, right? Not many of them write essays as an adult, but they do need to have really good communication skills, because whatever area that you work in, it doesn't matter what your work is, whether it's IT or it's teaching or it's, you know, whatever it is, everybody has to be able to communicate and to be able to communicate well. So that's always the biggest goal. And that's why I think narration is so valuable of a tool. It helps to build those relationships. It helps them to be a good communicator. And when you get to that point where they need to learn a form, if they already know how to write, the form is easy. The form is not a challenge. It's not an obstacle. It really does. It's like, oh, okay, so I just make it look like this. Like, okay, you know, it's not a big deal. So I think we overemphasize having that form early. And I think it's to the detriment of our students, because I think for a lot of them, it just freezes them up and it makes them panic. Whereas we can help them to just to communicate.
Yeah, I love that. That's like preach. I think it's the same, what you just described is like the feeling of the parent that causes them to go there. It's the same impulse behind the, you know, being concerned about the rudimentary persuasive essay in the Lost Tools of Writing. Like, oh no, they have to be ready to write this college level essay now. And because I don't see that now, this is bad. And it's not enough. And it's just, we're teaching them how to communicate. And it's all those nuances and ways of being and ways of thinking that create that result.
Yep. Yeah. And I think for both narration and how you approach the Lost Tools of Writing and rhetoric is it's so key that we look at it through this view of loving our neighbor and learning how to listen well. Because when they're learning to do oral narration and they're listening auditorily and then narrating that, that's also teaching them to be a good listener to people, right? To be a good listener to their neighbor. And so those are big keys.
Yeah, I can see that, Lauren. Yes, yes, there's no shame or anything wrong about using a curriculum, an external resource. We each get to decide what we need and trust ourselves as well. And sometimes that's a thing, you know, like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It can be a tremendous support while we're growing in our ability to coach a skill and in just managing a lot of things as a homeschool mom. There's a lot that we manage, and those supports are wonderful and tremendous. And yes, there's space for that.
Yeah, and they can help you see where you're going too, right? Like I said, this crossing the bridge between narration and more formal writing. A lot of times we can't see what that looks like. And so sometimes those tools are more for us even than our students, just so we can see where are we going and what do we need to do to get there. What are some steps?
Yeah, because you have the milestones that you're taking your student through, but you also have the milestones you're going through in learning how to teach it. So there's two different skill sets being cultivated as homeschool moms.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, that's a great comment here. I'm not, your name is kind of funny, so I don't know what name to use, but Crystal. Okay. Crystal. Yeah, that's great. You remember that the curriculum is only a resource and a support. It's not it's not the master. You are the master, and it's a tool. It's a tool for you to use. Yeah. Oh, Melissa has a good tip. Kids also like to record their narrations if you can't listen at that exact moment. Yes. Yeah, Voxer. We use that on Voxer too sometimes. Like, okay, I have an appointment, I have to go. I can't listen to your narration, but hop on Voxer and give it to me there, and I'll listen to it when I'm done.
Awesome. All right, let's just take, if anyone needs like a 2-minute reset, and we're going to come back and have our Q&A session. So just take a couple minutes and we'll we'll do that. But first, I just want to thank Jessica. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. It was tremendous, and I know it supported a lot of people. If you have any other questions that you want to capture, make sure to add them to our Q&A. I'm going to paste the link copy here. So there's our Q&A form. You can add them there, and enjoy your break. We'll be back in a few.